Okay, and good morning to Principles of Micro with James Bland. Today I am going to give you a class on tariffs, and so this is following up on my videos on international trade and the total surplus associated with opening up a market to international trade. Okay, so one of the instruments the government has where it can intervene in markets with international trade is a tariff, and this is going to operate as a tax, but it's going to be a tax that's only paid on imports. Okay, so while the stuff we did in ManQ, I think chapter 6, looked at the importance of, looked at the role of taxes on a market where everyone pays the tax. In this situation, the tax is only going to be assessed on goods that cross the border. So if we want to think about this, we've got our local country, and we've got the rest of the world. And we have several different groups of people in here. So we have local consumers, and we have local producers, and we have international producers. Okay, and if this is a good that we've got an importing country, well, local producers are going to be producing stuff that local consumers are buying, but since the world price is below the equilibrium price that we'd have if we did not have international trade, then there are also some international producers who are sending their goods to the local country to be consumed by local consumers. Okay, and so these are imports, and we could think about this as quantity produced domestically, and this is quantity produced internationally, and the tariff is only assessed on this quantity here. Okay, so what we're going to do is to think about what happens when the government imposes a tariff on a market that has imports, right? So if we're going to tax imports and we're not going to get imports anyway, then this isn't an interesting problem. But if the government imposes a tariff on a market with imports, then we're going to change the prices that local consumers and producers are facing. Okay, so let's set up our supply and demand diagram. Here's our supply curve. Here's our demand curve. And we have an international price which must be below the domestic price if we didn't have international trade. So this is the international price here. Okay, so from before, if we were just trading at the international price without any tariffs, then this would be quantity demanded locally. This would be quantity supplied locally. And this difference here, the difference between these two, are our imports. Okay, so now let's suppose that the government imposes a tariff of $T per item for every item that crosses the border. Okay, so as an international seller, this is what we need to think about. Okay, so let's go back to our problem over here with our international producers and think about what they're facing now. Okay, so if they send their goods to the local consumers, they're going to get the local price, we'll get to that, minus the tariff, right? So suppose this tariff is assessed on international producers. If they sell their good, say in the US, the consumer might pay $10, but if there's a $1 tariff on that item, they're only going to be able to take home $9. Okay? So we might have some other country here that the international producers can sell their good to. Okay? And so over here, suppose this country doesn't have any tariffs, then if they sell their good to this other country, then they're going to collect the international price, right? So the assumption here is that any one country is so small that they can sell, in this case we're talking about an exporter, so they can sell as much as they like at that international price. And so these international producers are going to think, well, if I get the international price by sending my good to another country, why would I send it to the US unless I received the same amount of money, right? So suppose that you are a Mexican avocado grower and you're thinking about where to send your tariffs, and the US has a 20 cent per avocado tariff imposed on avocados that cross the border between Mexico and the US, but Canada doesn't. Well, if you can sell your avocados in Canada for $1 each, then you better get $1.20 for your avocados in the US, because you're only taking home $1 after that tariff is taken off. Okay, so basically international producers are going to be able to access that international price no matter what, and so if they're going to sell to a country that has tariffs, they're going to need to be compensated by the international price plus the tariff for it to be worth their while to send their products that way. Okay, so what this means is that instead of the international price being the relevant price for our domestic market, what's actually relevant is the international price plus the tariff. Okay? And so what we get is a second horizontal line along here. So the height of this line is the international price plus the tariff. Okay? And so when we have this tariff, we need to think about this. Well, why would this be the relevant line? Well, sellers, if we think about consumers, they're not going to be able to buy the good at the international price itself, because international sellers don't want to sell to them at that price, because they're going to have to pay the tariff when they sell the good to a local consumer, right? So they need to be compensated more to make it worth their while to sell to them. Okay, so consumers don't have access to this lower international price now. What they have access to is the international price plus the tariff, right? They can buy as much or as little as they like from the international market, but they're going to be paying the international price plus the tariff. Okay, so this now becomes the price consumers pay when we have a tariff. And because sellers know this, they know that, consumers aren't going to be able to get a better deal than the international price plus the tariff. So any seller who is able to produce their good at or below a cost of the international price plus the tariff is going to be willing to sell, right? So this is also the price sellers receive. Okay, so what happens when we have a tariff? Well, now we get quantity supplied with a tariff here. This is quantity supplied and quantity demanded locally. And we have a smaller number of imports, right? Imports have gone down. Okay, right? Imports go down as we raise tariffs. Okay. So if we think about this, sellers, and these are local sellers, are happy, right? The price sellers receive has gone up, so they're happy. And consumers are not so happy, right? Price consumers pay has gone down, and so they're buying less stuff at a higher price. Okay. The thing that we need to watch out for here, though, is that there's also now a third group in here. So remember, in Chapter 8 of Mankiw, we learnt that the government is this third part here that we need to count in surplus, and I'll do another video on surplus. But here, remember that the tariff is only assessed on the items that are imported. Okay, so the items that are imported are these ones here, and so there's a quantity. Okay, that's the quantity of imports. And for every item that crosses the border, the government collects the value of the tariff. Okay, so this rectangle here is our, well, sorry, I should be doing this in blue because this is after the tariff. This is our government revenue. Okay, so government revenue has obviously gone up, right? They're collecting revenue, even though before they did not. But what we also have here is that sellers are better off, right? They can sell their good for higher prices. That's unambiguously good for sellers. And consumers are worse off because they're facing higher prices. Okay, so I'll leave it there for the moment, but in the next video that I'll post, we will do the surplus calculations for this to work out whether imposing a tariff increases or decreases total surplus. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm James Bland, and I will see you later.